Imagine this, March 3rd, 1989, in the veiled heart of rural South Carolina. A 5-year-old boy, Justin Lee Turner, was swallowed by the morning mist, vanishing somewhere between the sanctuary of his front door and the school bus that awaited him down a lonely dirt road. But the true horror, the chilling twist in this tale, is where his body was discovered 2 days later, a place so inconceivable it defied all reason. The truth of his final hours would become a ghost, haunting the community for over 3 decades, a labyrinth of secrets so dark that when investigators finally illuminated the path years later, the revelations would eclipse their most terrifying theories. An innocent child, a tranquil country morning, and a sinister truth that would take 35 years to claw its way into the light. Before we descend into the abyss of this story, do me a small favor, unleash a comment with the number 1 if this genre of dark truths grips your soul, and strike that subscribe button, for we are unearthing the cases that will steal your sleep, the stories that scream to be told, the mysteries that demand a final answer. Declare which state you're watching from in the shadows below, and let us forge this alliance of the curious. Now, let us peel back the layers of what truly befell Justin Lee Turner. The day was born like any other Friday in the quiet corners of Berkeley County, South Carolina. Justin Lee Turner, a cherubic kindergartner with sun-spun hair and eyes the color of a summer sky, a shy smile that could ignite a room, awoke in the humble home he shared with his father, Victor, and stepmother, Pamela. Their house was a lonely outpost on Horseshoe Road, near the sleepy town of Monk's Corner, cradled by whispering pines and sleeping fields, the kind of place where trust was the only lock on the door. Justin was a vibrant spark of a 5-year-old boy, a vessel of boundless energy and wonder. He was a creature of the outdoors, a fleet-footed spirit who raced through the fields, his best friend Michael Smith, always in tow. School was his kingdom. His teachers at Whitesville Elementary painted a portrait of a gentle, tender soul who moved through the world with a quiet grace. He possessed a rare magic for coaxing smiles from strangers, even from behind a veil of shyness. His classmates revered him, and Michael, his shadow and his friend, awaited his arrival at the bus stop each morning, a sacred, unbreakable ritual. That fateful Friday morning, Justin devoured his favorite breakfast, a bowl of cinnamon cereal, consumed with the fierce urgency known only to 5-year-olds. Children of that age are like hummingbirds, never still for a moment, always vibrating with the need to chase the day. Pamela guided him through the morning rites, a final, unknowing act of care. It was all a fragile tableau of normalcy, just another beat in the quiet rhythm of their country life, a moment of peace before the storm. The journey from Justin's front door to the neighbor's driveway was a mere whisper of a walk, perhaps a couple hundred yards down a ribbon of red clay. Justin had traced this path 1,000 times. It was a safe, hallowed ground, a path for kicking stones, for hunting insects, for waving to a familiar face in a nearby yard. It was a path of pure innocence, or so the world believed. But on that particular morning, in the heart of that familiar walk, the path veered into an unimaginable darkness. When the great yellow school bus sighed to a stop at its usual post that morning, Michael Smith was there, a loyal sentinel, his sneakers likely drumming an impatient rhythm on the ground. But Justin was not. Michael scanned the length of the road leading to Justin's house, his eyes squinting against the nascent sun, expecting to see his friend burst into view at any second. But the road remained an empty, silent stage. The bus driver held her post for a minute, maybe 2, her gaze flicking to her watch. Delays were part of the morning's dance. A last-minute trip to the bathroom, a misplaced shoe. It was life. But the small, familiar figure never broke the horizon. With a heavy sigh, the bus driver sealed the doors and resumed her pilgrimage. Michael pressed his face to the cold glass of the window, his gaze still fixed on the empty road, watching Justin's house recede into the distance. He must be sick, Michael reasoned. That was the only answer that made sense. Kids got sick. They stayed home. It was nothing. And yet, a cold splinter of dread lodged itself in his young heart. He knew his friend, and Justin never broke their morning pact without a word. At Whitesville Elementary School, the morning roll call echoed through the kindergarten classroom. When the teacher called Justin's name and was met with silence, she marked him absent, her pen stroke sealing a fate she could not yet comprehend. A child's absence was a common thing, a casualty of winter colds and fleeting fevers. She made a quiet promise to herself to check on him, to send work home, to keep him from falling behind. The school day unfolded in a symphony of innocence. Children painted worlds with crayons. They gave voice to the alphabet. They conquered the playground at recess. But Justin's empty desk stood as a silent, lonely sentinel, a question mark no one yet knew to ask. Whispers fluttered among his classmates. Where is Justin? Is he okay? Michael repeated his theory like a prayer he must be sick, but the strange, shadowy feeling in his gut refused to fade. And back at the Turner house on Horseshoe Road, a sinister truth was taking root in the silence. But the world was still blissfully unaware. The truth was, Justin never reached the bus stop. Somewhere on that short, familiar stretch of earth, the unthinkable had occurred. And as the hours bled away, one into the next, time itself was becoming the enemy. It wasn't until the afternoon sun began to bleed into gold, around 4:30 or 5 p.m., that the fragile illusion of a normal day finally shattered. Pamela Turner walked the short distance to the neighbor's home where Michael lived, a casual inquiry on her lips. Had anyone seen Justin? Michael's grandmother was present, as Michael delivered the words he had carried all day. Justin wasn't on the bus. He never appeared at the stop. Those words detonated in the quiet afternoon air. A mask of disbelief washed over Pamela's face. If Justin wasn't on the bus, if he wasn't at school, then where in God's name was he? She had moved through her day cloaked in the comforting assumption that he was safe, learning his letters, laughing with friends. But now, 8 or 9 agonizing hours after he should have boarded that bus, she was staring into a chasm of terrifying possibility. He had never made it there at all. Pamela scrambled back to her house, her hands trembling as she dialed 911. Her voice was a frayed thread of panic as she told the dispatcher her 5-year-old stepson was gone. He had left for the bus that morning and had not returned. But even as she spoke, the horrifying pivot was happening in her mind. He never made it to school. He had been stolen from the light of day, somewhere between his own front door and the end of the driveway. He had been gone for hours, and no one, not a single soul, had been looking. The tranquil rhythm of that Friday evening was violently torn asunder. Within moments, the wail of sirens was a scream tearing through the fabric of the twilight as Berkeley County Sheriff's deputies converged on Horseshoe Road. Deputies James Miller and Philip Rodriguez were among the first to breach the scene. They found a world unraveled. Pamela, frantic. Victor, a caged animal pacing in the yard, and neighbors, their faces etched with a shared, encroaching dread. When was the last time you saw him? Deputy Miller's question cut through the chaos as he opened his notepad. This morning, Pamela's voice shattered. He had his breakfast. He got ready, just like always. He walked down for the bus. I thought he was at school. I thought he was safe all day. And what was he wearing? They painted a picture of his last outfit, the simple armor of a little boy, jeans and a t-shirt, perhaps a jacket against the lingering March chill. Victor recited the details of Justin's morning ritual, the sacred path to the bus stop, any fragment of information that could help them begin to map the impossible. As the sun bled out below the horizon, the search ignited with a desperate fury. A small army of deputies, family, and neighbors spread out, a frantic net cast into the darkness. They chanted Justin's name, their voices becoming haunting pleas, swallowed by the indifferent pines, their flashlight beams slicing through the deepening gloom as a cold terror mounted with every tick of the clock. Justin! Justin! Can you hear us? Their calls were a desperate mantra cast into the encroaching night, a prayer for a miracle against the crushing silence. The search parties scoured every conceivable hiding place for a small boy. They peered into sheds, crawled under porches, unsealed parked cars, and tore through bushes. They walked the route from the house to the bus stop again and again, their eyes raking the ground for a sign, a clue, a tear in the fabric of the ordinary. But the dirt road held its secrets close. There were no marks of a struggle, no forgotten treasures, no one who had seen a single thing amiss. As true night fell, a deeper desperation took hold. Tracking dogs arrived, their powerful noses filled with the scent of Justin's clothes before they were unleashed upon the land. The dogs quested across the property, their bodies low to the ground, but no coherent trail emerged. It was as if the boy had been lifted from the earth, leaving not even a whisper of his scent behind, as if he had simply dissolved into the air. Volunteers, their faces grim, crawled on their bellies beneath the Turner house, explored the cold interiors of every vehicle, and sifted through the contents of every outbuilding. They combed the dense, dark woods in disciplined grids, terrified of missing the one crucial spot. Some began to check the local ponds, a cold, unspoken terror that Justin had wandered toward the water's dark embrace, coiling in every parent's gut. As this community grappled with a parent's most primal nightmare, tell me in the comments, what case chills you to the very bone? Have you ever known the embrace of a small town, a place where every face is a story? In such a place, a missing child is not just a tragedy, it is a wound on the soul of the town itself. Victor Turner was a ghost among the searchers, his face a mask of anguish. He called his son's name until his voice was raw, retracing his own steps in a tortured pilgrimage, hoping his eyes had deceived him the first time. Pamela remained at the heart of the storm, a whirlwind of frantic phone calls and desperate answers for the deputies who circled her. Justin's biological mother, Jennifer Pace, existed in another world, a world that had not yet been shattered. She and Victor were divorced, their lives separated by distance and complicated history. But when the phone call came that Friday afternoon, a voice on the other end telling her that her son was missing, her world stopped turning. Miles and hours stood between her and Monk's Corner, and she began the journey, an eternity spent in a steel cage, each mile a new and exquisite torment. It was Jennifer's father, Justin's maternal grandfather, who first received the devastating news. When he called his daughter, the words he spoke were an alien language, impossible to process. "Your son never got off the school bus. He's missing." The sentences were nonsensical architecture. How could a 5-year-old boy, a beacon of pure light, simply be extinguished in the tiny, sacred space between his own front door and the promise of a school day? As Friday's twilight bled into an endless night, a chilling stillness fell over the community, for Justin remained a ghost. Doors that once stood open were now bolted shut, a silent testament to a new and venomous fear. The very thought that a child could be plucked from a sun-drenched country road, a place stitched together by familiar faces, was a terror that now coiled in every heart. If it could happen to Justin, it could happen to them all. By the dawn of Saturday, March 4th, the search had swelled into a tidal wave of humanity. More than 100 souls descended upon the land, a desperate army against an unseen foe. Berkeley County Sheriff's deputies stood shoulder to shoulder with local police, firefighters, and a legion of civilian volunteers. The Turner property had transformed into a war room, a chaotic theater of maps and grids, where every whispered plan was a prayer against the encroaching darkness. At the helm, Lieutenant Samuel Richardson, a field commander in this grim campaign, carved the landscape into sectors of hope and dread. He dispatched his volunteer platoons, some to pierce the shadowed heart of the woods, others to trace the cold asphalt of the highways, and still more to knock on doors, searching for a single echo of that fateful Friday morning. "We will bring him home," Lieutenant Richardson's voice cut through the morning chill, a vow to the assembled faces. "Fan out, leave no stone unturned, and sound the alarm if you find anything, a scrap of fabric, a lost shoe, a whisper of disturbed earth, anything that feels wrong." With a grim and unified purpose, the searchers surged into the wilderness. They breached the silence of abandoned structures, clawed through thorny undergrowth, and waded into the icy embrace of creeks and marshes. Above, helicopters sliced the air, their mechanical eyes scanning the world below, while canine units, noses to the ground, chased the fading specter of ascent. Yet, as Saturday bled away, it left behind only emptiness. No sign, no trace, no Justin. A collective dread, thick and suffocating, had now seized the soul of Monk's Corner. The circus arrived in the form of news crews, their cameras like hungry eyes, their reporters feeding on the chaos. Justin's story, a whispered tragedy, soon became a regional headline. A 5-year-old boy vanished from his own front yard, a living nightmare broadcast for all to see. A new, unspoken law governed the land. Children were now prisoners of safety, their world shrinking to the confines of a yard, watched with a hawk's intensity. One grandfather confessed to deputies his own yard was no longer a sanctuary, only the fenced, in backyard, under his unblinking gaze, was safe. The sacred trust of this rural hamlet had been irrevocably shattered. And in the vacuum of truth, rumors began to breed like shadows in the dusk. Poisonous whispers suggested Justin had fled, a notion that felt hollow for a 5-year-old who adored his life. Others spun tales of a bitter custody war, wondering if Jennifer or someone from her fractured family had stolen him away in the night. The jagged edges of the divorce between Victor and Jennifer left a wound that invited such dark speculation. But the most terrifying theory, the one that slithered in the back of every mind, was that of a phantom predator. A stranger, cruising the lonely roads, who saw a moment of vulnerability and seized it, snatching a child in the light of day. It was the stuff of cold sweat horror, a story that meant Justin could be anywhere, and that the hourglass of hope was rapidly running out of sand. Lieutenant Richardson and his team plunged into the family's history, questioning Victor and Pamela relentlessly. They were architects of a timeline, excavating the family's soul, seeking to eliminate the first, cold rule of the hunt. In the world of missing children, the path to answers so often begins at the front door. Victor painted a portrait of a normal, loving bond with his son. He was a single father, he said, who had weathered the storms of custody battles, but he swore he had no secrets to keep. His desperation was a raw, open wound. Pamela, the stepmother, echoed his plea, insisting she loved Justin like her own, her voice breaking as she spoke of her devastation. The investigators' questions were like scalpels, probing for a weakness in the narrative. Were there arguments that morning? A reason for a child to be frightened? Had any strange specters haunted the edges of their property? But Victor and Pamela's story was a seamless, unyielding wall of normalcy. Nothing was amiss, they claimed. No one was out of place. The deputies cast their net wider, interrogating the neighborhood, but they pulled back only emptiness. Had anyone seen a boy on his way to the bus? A strange car on Horseshoe Road? A foreign face in their quiet corner of the world? But the answers were a deafening chorus of negation. It was just another quiet Friday, where no one had seen a damn thing. Michael Smith, at just 7 years old, felt his world fracture. He knew his best friend was gone, and the fear he saw in the adults' eyes was a language he was just beginning to understand. He heard their hushed, frantic whispers. He heard the thunder of the helicopters. He saw the grim processions combing the woods. And a terrible, misplaced guilt took root in his small heart. If only he had walked to Justin's house, maybe none of this would have happened. Smash that subscribe button if you dare to follow this story into the abyss, because we are descending into a darkness that no one could have ever predicted. As Saturday night cloaked the world in black, the search crews, hollowed by exhaustion, refused to surrender. Beams from spotlights cut through the darkness like desperate prayers. Some vowed to hunt through the night, their resolve a flickering candle against an overwhelming void, but a sense of futility was setting in. They had scoured every inch of this earth. Where was this child? The Berkeley County Sheriff's Office unleashed its final gambit. They summoned the FBI, bringing the full weight of the federal government into their small-town nightmare. Agents arrived like men from another world, armed with expertise in the dark art of child abduction, with forensic sciences that bordered on magic, and with databases filled with the names of monsters. The hunt had now officially become a search for a phantom. Jennifer Pace had finally arrived in Monk's Corner by Saturday, a woman held together by sheer will. The drive had been a blur of asphalt and anguish, her mind a torture chamber of unspeakable possibilities. The moment she saw the command post, a sprawling city of desperation, the reality struck her like a physical blow. Her baby was truly gone. She yearned to join the search, to tear through the woods with her bare hands, but the deputies urged her to wait, a prisoner at the epicenter of her own tragedy. And so she kept a tormented vigil, fueled by chain-smoked cigarettes and cold coffee, her body jolting with every approaching footstep, only to be met with the same hollow report. Another dead end, another patch of empty woods. The air between Jennifer and Victor was thick with the ghosts of their past. Their divorce had been a war, their custody battle, a brutal campaign of words that could never be unsaid. But now, in the face of this ultimate horror, their old war was forced into a fragile truce. Their son was lost in the darkness, and in that darkness, nothing else mattered. The dawn of Sunday, March 5th, broke cold and grey, marking 2 full days since the world had swallowed Justin whole. The searchers, ghosts of their former selves, returned from brief respites, their faces etched with a grim determination. The dogs were unleashed once more. The helicopters again took to the sky. Teams retraced their steps, searching the same ground again and again, haunted by the knowledge that a single missed detail could mean everything. The weight of 2 days pressed down on Lieutenant Richardson. No leads, no witnesses, no evidence, only the relentless, silent ticking of a clock that everyone could hear. He huddled with the FBI agents, mapping out new strategies, desperate to find an angle, a sliver of light in the suffocating darkness. Victor Turner was a phantom on his own land that Sunday morning, walking the grounds for what felt like the 100th time. He was a hollowed-out man, running on nothing but fear and a sliver of adrenaline. As others fanned out across the landscape, Victor found himself drawn to an outbuilding, a travel camper parked on the property, a relic of happier times. This camper was not an oversight. It had been searched, and searched again. Deputies had swept through it on that first frantic Friday night. Volunteers had opened its doors on Saturday. It was one of the first places they had looked. A cardinal rule: when a child vanishes from home, you check every box, every closet, every possible shadow. But some unseen force, be it desperation or a chilling intuition, pulled Victor toward that camper one last time. He was a man possessed by a need to do something, anything. He climbed the steps, his feet heavy as lead, and stepped back into the small, familiar interior. And then his hand reached for a storage cabinet, a simple wooden door built into the camper's wall. In that moment, as his fingers closed around the latch, his world did not just explode. It was annihilated. Here he is. Here he is. Victor's voice tore through the air, but it was not a cry of relief. It was a sound stripped of all humanity, a raw, guttural scream of absolute horror that stopped the hearts of everyone who heard it. "Something's in there. Everybody stand back," a voice commanded as the searchers, drawn by the terrible sound, converged on the camper, rushing toward a truth they were not prepared to face. There, inside that small, dark cabinet, curled into a space no child should ever have to know, was the body of Justin Lee Turner. The little boy who had vanished into thin air had been there all along, a silent witness to the frantic search, hidden in a tomb within his own family's camper, while hundreds of people had called his name. The scene that erupted was a maelstrom of raw, human horror. Victor recoiled from the camper, his face a canvas of bleached terror, his hands trembling as if touched by a ghost. Searchers, drawn by the sound, charged forward only to halt in their tracks, paralyzed by the ghastly diorama Victor had unveiled. Some fractured instantly, their grief a sudden, violent storm of tears. Others stood as statues of disbelief, their minds refusing to stitch together the nightmare before them. Deputies surged forward, their voices sharp commands that sliced through the chaos, transforming the hallowed ground of hope into a quarantined zone of darkness. This was no longer a mission of rescue. It was an excavation of evil, a murder scene. For one look at Justin's small, still form declared that this was no tragic accident, no tale of a lost child succumbing to the elements. This was a story written in a far more sinister ink. Lieutenant Richardson arrived within moments, descending into the heart of the nightmare. The investigator's soul, though staggered by the emotional blow, took command. He orchestrated his deputies with grim precision, weaving a perimeter of caution tape, a fragile shield to protect the truth from the world. The FBI was summoned, the coroner called, and forensic technicians, the high priests of such dark rituals, began to prepare their instruments. But first, a task of impossible delicacy, to lift Justin's body from its profane cradle. The boy was arranged in a way that screamed of another's touch, a deliberate placement, not the innocent exploration of a child. He was folded into the cramped space, a secret tucked away by a desperate, fleeting hand. And upon his small body were scriptures of trauma, a testament so vile it forced even the most hardened investigators to avert their gaze, a bitter bile rising in their throats. This innocent 5-year-old child had been made to suffer before his light was extinguished. He had been brutalized, his life stolen in a manner so cruel it defied the very notion of humanity. Strike the like button if this story has ensnared your soul, because we must now walk the path of what came next, and explore how the specter of this investigation would haunt every soul it touched for decades to come. The coroner arrived, a somber officiant to pronounce the finality of death and preside over the removal of the boy's earthly form. Forensic photographers became chroniclers of the macabre, their flashes capturing every detail: the body's chilling pose, the cabinet's dark interior, the camper's silent witness, and the weeping landscape. Every fragment had to be preserved, for in these pieces lay the ghost of justice. As they tenderly lifted Justin from the cabinet, a singular, chilling detail struck them all. His skin was unnaturally cold to the touch. It was not the simple cold of mortality, but a profound, deep-seated chill, that defied the season. It was March in South Carolina, a time of gentle warmth, not freezing temperatures. A body left in an unheated camper for 2 days should not possess this glacial quality. It ignited a terrifying question. Had Justin been entombed somewhere else, in a place of artificial frost, before being delivered to this final, grim stage? The autopsy promised answers, but the truths it would uncover would only carve the horror deeper into their minds. The medical examiner concluded that Justin's life had been choked from him by a ligature, a strap perhaps, or a leash. The story of his end was written in the cruel marks encircling his small neck. His time of death was a haunting echo from the past, estimated between late Friday morning and early Friday afternoon, a fact betrayed by the undigested food in his stomach. But that was not the end of the desecration. The autopsy revealed a violation that shattered the soul. Justin had been assaulted with a cylindrical object. The specifics are a litany of brutality too graphic to recite, but it confirmed this child had endured the twin horrors of physical and sexual violence before his passing. The realization that Justin's final moments on this earth were a symphony of terror and agony was a weight too heavy for the hearts of those who loved him. The medical examiner's report became a fountain of questions. If Justin had perished on Friday, he had already been gone for the entirety of the frantic search. His body had lain hidden on his own property, a silent effigy in that camper, while his family and 100 volunteers scoured the surrounding woods and fields. The monster who did this had tucked him away and then, what? Melted into the searching crowd, or simply watched the chaos unfold from the shadows. And the mystery of the body's unnatural coldness lingered like a frost in the air. Forensic experts spun a chilling theory that Justin's body had been stored in a freezer or refrigerator, a calculated act to obscure the true time of death. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a premeditated atrocity, a chess move made by a cold and cunning killer. The Turner property had been a hive of law enforcement and volunteers since Friday evening. The camper had been swept multiple times, a fact that now seemed impossible. How could they have missed him? Was it a catastrophic oversight, a failure of diligence? Or was the truth more sinister, that the body had been placed there times after times the initial searches, a brazen act by someone who could move like a ghost through a property under siege? Lieutenant Richardson and his team were forced to entertain every possibility, no matter how venomous. In the grim calculus of child murder, the statistics point a finger inward toward the family circle. It is a monstrous reality, but one an investigator cannot afford to ignore. Their gaze fell upon Victor and Pamela Turner, a cloud of suspicion gathering even around the father who had made the soul-shattering discovery. The geography of the crime was a betrayal in itself. Justin vanished from his own sanctuary, was slain, and then concealed within the family's camper. It screamed of someone with an intimate map of the property and a key to its secrets. The timeline was a riddle. He disappeared on his way to the bus, yet he died hours later. Had he ever truly left the property? Or was the walk to the bus stop a fiction spun to hide a tragedy born within the home? Victor and Pamela's movements on that fateful Friday were placed under a microscope. Victor's alibi at work was dissected, second by second. Was there a sliver of time, a window of opportunity? Pamela claimed she watched Justin leave, her day unfolding under the false sun of his safety at school. But was it the truth? Could an argument, a moment of discipline gone horribly wrong, have spiraled into this abyss? The element of sexual assault painted the crime in even darker hues. This was no tragic accident, followed by a panicked cover-up. This was the work of a predator. The deliberate violation of this child, before or after his death, bespoke a depravity so profound it suggested a mind utterly consumed by darkness. Forensic teams descended upon the camper, treating it as a sacred, silent tomb. They hunted for the phantom traces of the killer, a fingerprint, a hair, a single fiber of cloth. They scoured the cabinet where Justin was found, praying for a whisper of evidence. They examined every inch of the camper's exterior, searching for a sign of forced entry, a scar left by the intruder. The results were a symphony of frustration. Fingerprints adorned the camper's interior, but they sang a familiar song: Victor, Pamela, Justin. They were the echoes of a family, not a monster. Unidentified prints existed, but they could be the ghosts of any searcher who had passed by. The science of 1989 was a flickering candle in a hurricane, its DNA technology too nascent to illuminate the shadows. Investigators questioned Victor and Pamela, separately and together. again and again. They delved into the heart of their family, probing for fissures, for secrets. They pressed them about the camper, its last use, the keepers of its keys, its state of security. They needed to know who else had walked within its walls. Through it all, Victor and Pamela were a bulwark of professed innocence, their words a litany of grief and horror. They swore they had no part in this nightmare. Victor, especially, seemed to be a man hollowed out by his discovery, haunted by the image of finding his own son discarded like refuse in a storage cabinet. But sentiment had no place in this investigation. The evidence, or lack thereof, pointed to someone who moved through the Turner's world with intimate familiarity. FBI behavioral analysts sketched a portrait of the killer. A predator, yes, but one who acted with a frantic haste, suggesting a close proximity to the crime and a desperate need to conceal it. A terrifying theory began to take root. What if Justin never left the house that morning? What if something happened within those walls, and the abduction was a carefully constructed stage play? The walk to the bus stop, a clever piece of misdirection. If that were true, the monster they were hunting was not a stranger, but wore the face of a parent. But this theory, too, was a tapestry woven with holes. If Victor had left for work before Justin was meant for the bus, his alibi might stand as an unbreachable fortress. Suspicion would then pivot to Pamela. Yet, she had no history of violence, no known discord with Justin. By all accounts, their relationship was one of placid functionality, not simmering rage. So the investigators' gaze drifted outward again, to the margins of society, to the drifters and lost souls who haunt the rural landscapes of Berkeley County. Could a predator have been watching, lying in wait? Could they have seized a fleeting opportunity, committed their unspeakable acts, and then used the family's own camper as a makeshift tomb? But that theory stumbled over the chilling fact of the body's coldness. It implied a second location, a place with a freezer, and a return to the property, a brazen, high-stakes maneuver to plant the body amidst a swarm of police and searchers. It seemed an act of theatrical, almost unbelievable, risk. The investigation slammed into one frustrating wall after another. The evidence screamed of a heinous crime, the strangulation, the assault, but it whispered no name. There were no witnesses to the darkness. No physical evidence offered a definitive signpost to the killer. The forensic limitations of 1989 had shackled them. For months, Lieutenant Richardson and his team battled the silence. They interviewed every person who had set foot on the property, every friend of the family, every shadow that might hold a secret. They scoured databases for known offenders. They chased down every lead, every whisper on the wind, no matter how faint. But as 1989 bled into 1990, and 1990 gave way to 1991, the trail grew cold, dissolving into the mists of time, not from a lack of will, but from a sheer absence of direction. The file on Justin Lee Turner's murder remained open, a wound that would not close, but the active hunt for his killer fell silent. For Justin's family, the absence of answers was a unique and endless form of torture. Jennifer Pace, his biological mother, was shattered by his murder. Guilt became her constant companion, the crushing weight of knowing he was with his father when the darkness came. A different custody arrangement, a harder fight in the divorce. These what-ifs became the ghosts that would haunt her for the rest of her days. A mother's heart, shattered, became a crucible of obsession, a relentless quest for the truth. Jennifer could not let the ghost of her son rest, could not surrender to the silence, could not accept a world where his killer walked free. She became a storm at the gates of law enforcement, her calls to the sheriff's office a constant thunder, demanding, pushing, refusing to let the embers of the case grow cold. She wove his story into the public consciousness, a shield against the creeping fog of forgotten tragedies. A permanent shadow fell over Monk's Corner, a chilling whisper that forever altered the town's soul. The sanctity of home was broken, the innocence of childhood shattered. The horrifying knowledge that a child could be stolen from his own sanctuary, his body hidden while a community searched in vain, poisoned the very air. Some fled, unable to breathe in a place so thick with dark memories, while those who remained held their own children in a grip of newfound terror. Michael Smith, Justin's shadow and playmate, was left to walk through life haunted by an empty space at a bus stop. The loss became a part of him, an ache that time could not heal. As a man, he would etch Justin's face into his own skin, a permanent elegy of ink and memory. He faithfully made pilgrimages to Justin's grave, leaving tokens of a stolen childhood, speaking into the silence as if his friend could still hear. The years bled into one another, a river of time carrying with it a chilling, unanswered question. The case lay dormant, a sleeping monster. Jennifer Pace, a warrior to the end, never surrendered her fight for justice. But it was a war waged against an invisible enemy. In 2004, after 15 years of searching, Jennifer's own heart gave out. She crossed into the eternal quiet, never knowing the face of the monster who stole her son. Her family whispered that it was the grief itself, the unrelenting weight of it all, that had finally consumed her. Leave a thought below on the nature of justice, for in the deep, frozen silence of decades, a storm was about to break. The file might have gathered dust for eternity, a frozen testament to a crime without a name, if not for the relentless march of science and a sheriff with a fire to illuminate the dark. In the early 2020s, Sheriff Christopher Lewis of Berkeley County declared war on the ghosts of the past, vowing to resurrect cold cases with the weapons of a new era. Justin Lee Turner's name was at the very top of his list. Sheriff Lewis unleashed a new breed of hunter, a cold case team armed with the relentless light of modern science to dissect the 1989 investigation. They breathed digital life into faded files, pored over autopsy reports with new understanding, and held the ghosts of witness statements up to the light. The forensic alchemy of today could conjure truths from thin air that were impossible to see in 1989. Their first act was to resurrect the ghost of March 3rd, 1989, meticulously weaving a tapestry of time and place. They hunted down the original players in this tragedy, their memories now clouded by decades, and looked upon the physical evidence as if for the first time, praying it would finally speak. Within this crucible of inquiry, one flame burned brightest: Detective Sarah Martinez. Justin's case became her obsession, a sacred duty. She submerged herself in the file, living and breathing its every faded word, its every gruesome photograph. She saw not a cold case, but a 5-year-old boy, frozen in time, his entire future a universe of stolen stars. The team's gaze narrowed upon the chillingly bizarre artifacts of the crime scene. The unnatural coldness of the body was a screaming clue. Where could a killer find a crypt of ice large enough for a child? The Turners' home had a freezer, yes, but the audacity, the sheer horror of using one's own home for such a desecration, it seemed to defy belief. How could such a secret be kept? And then there was the unspeakable violation, a desecration that screamed of a motive far darker than a simple cover-up. This was the signature of a predator, or perhaps the elaborate stagecraft of a killer desperate to cast blame upon a phantom. The team walked the shadowed corridors of the criminal mind, seeking to understand the soul that could commit such an atrocity. The more Detective Martinez and her team descended into the darkness, the more the compass of suspicion, with an unerring and dreadful certainty, swung back toward the very heart of the home. Victor Turner and Pamela Turner. It was not a conclusion they sought, but one that the evidence relentlessly forced upon them. The body's location, the timeline's cruel logic, the access, the opportunity, it all pointed inward. Within the brittle, yellowed pages of the original file, they unearthed whispers of doubt, faint inconsistencies in Victor and Pamela's words from 1989, tiny cracks in their story that now, under the harsh light of modern scrutiny, looked like gaping chasms. Was their frantic grief a performance? Was their sorrow a mask? The hunters decided it was time to face the ghosts of the past, to seek out Victor and Pamela in their new lives. Decades had passed. Victor had a new wife, a new life in a different state. Pamela, now reborn as Megan, lived her own separate existence. They were in their 60s now, the tragedy of 1989, a distant, buried memory. At first, they wore the masks of cooperation, their words professing a desire to finally illuminate the darkness surrounding Justin's fate. But as the questions, honed to a razor's edge, cut closer to the bone, the facade began to crumble. The warmth of cooperation chilled into the ice of suspicion. Detective Martinez drew the web tighter, her voice a steady, chilling current. Justin vanished from your land. His body was found on your land. The timeline screams that he died when you both were there. His body was cold, like it had been in a freezer, and you had one. He was violated in a way that points to a predator, or someone staging it. He was found in your camper. Help me see a world where the monster wasn't already inside the house. Victor's shield of innocence began to crack, his denials curdling into the venom of a cornered man. He spat accusations of harassment, of a desperate police force seeking a scapegoat. He swore his love for his son, a desperate incantation against the encroaching darkness. Megan's denials were a fragile performance, betrayed by the silent scream of her own body, the faltering rhythm of her lies. The pregnant pauses, the nervous dance of her hands, the fractured memories of that morning, they were not proof, but they were damning whispers in the quiet interrogation room. The past was summoned into the present, as forensic sorcerers breathed new life into relics of the crime. They coaxed secrets from biological samples that had slept for decades, seeking the ghost of a DNA profile. They stared at the faint marks on Justin's neck, asking modern experts what unholy instrument could have left such a scar. And then, a silent witness spoke from beyond the grave. From the very fibers of the camper, a spectral glow emerged under the modern alchemy of luminol, the unmistakable ghost of blood, long since scrubbed away. A test confirmed the blood was Justin's. He had bled in that camper, and someone had tried to erase the sin. The implication was a dagger to the heart of their alibi. The camper, this tomb, had been scrubbed clean during that terrible window of time when a frantic search raged just outside its walls. Who but someone from within the household could have performed such a ghastly act of sanitation? The team then stared into the coldest possibility of all. The theory that followed was a descent into pure, domestic horror. That Justin's small body had been entombed in the icy darkness of the family's own freezer between his last breath on Friday and his discovery on Sunday. It spoke not of panic, but of a cold, calculated deception. The question hung in the air, a chilling specter. Could a monster truly live beside you, hiding an unthinkable secret in the mundane chill of a basement freezer? The team concluded, with a shudder, that in a house with hidden corners and shadowed spaces, it was terrifyingly possible. Share this descent into darkness with a fellow seeker of truth, because the revelation that clawed its way into the light in 2024 would shatter every expectation. In the ghost-haunted month of March, 2024, a lifetime later, on the 35th anniversary of his final breath, Sheriff Christopher Lewis stepped before the world. The press conference he held sent a tremor through Berkeley County, a shockwave that would be felt across the nation. He announced that the ghosts of the past had finally been given names. Warrants were issued for the arrest of Victor Turner and Megan Turner for the murder of their son. The words he spoke were not just news. They were a seismic shockwave, cracking a 35-year-old foundation of mystery and grief. After decades of silence, the wheels of justice were finally, violently, grinding forward. Sheriff Lewis laid bare the evidence, a grim mosaic that pointed to an unimaginable betrayal by both Victor and Megan. The sheriff painted a damning portrait, one born from resurrected evidence, suggesting the story of a walk to the bus stop was a masterfully crafted lie, the first scene in a horrifying play. The cold case team's conclusion was that both Victor and Megan were present for their son's last moments, and that they had conspired to bury the truth along with his body. The unforgivable act against the child hinted at a depraved soul, a violation likely committed by Victor himself. The chilling of the body was a masterstroke of deception, an attempt to manipulate time itself, and hiding him in the camper was a final, cynical act, placing him where he could be found by the very hands that had orchestrated his disappearance. The investigators' theory was a tapestry woven from the threads of nightmares, a life extinguished within the home's four walls, a body hidden in a frozen crypt while a false alarm was raised, then moved to the camper for the final, gruesome act of discovery. Victor, the horrified father, was merely playing a role he had written for himself. For Justin's bloodline, the echoes of his mother's fight carried on by cousins, aunts, and uncles, the news was a tidal wave of sorrow and vindication. 35 years of waiting had come to an end. Jennifer Pace did not live to see the day, having passed in 2004, but her family felt her presence, a spirit at peace, knowing her long, desperate battle had not been in vain. A cousin of Justin's, Sarah Parsons, merely a child of 8 when his life was stolen, had risen over the long years to become the family's resonant voice. Through the digital ether and whispered remembrances, she wove his story into the fabric of the present, a relentless force pushing against the tides of forgetting. When the warrants were finally unveiled, her words poured forth a torrent of raw emotion, thanking Sheriff Lewis and his tireless crusaders for refusing to let Justin's ghost rest in silence. At long last, after 35 years of shadow, the souls who ripped Justin from our lives will be dragged into the light of justice, Sarah's message blazed. My Aunt Jennifer championed this cause until her very last breath. Her hope was a fire that never went out. How I wish she were here to witness this dawn. Victor and Megan Turner were ensnared by the law not long after the warrants descended. Both now in their 60s, they were weathered phantoms of the figures they'd been in 1989. Victor's counsel was swift, unleashing a statement that screamed of his client's purity, vowing a ferocious battle against the charges. Megan's followed suit, a perfect echo. Both lawyers decried the case as a fragile house of cards, built on whispers and shadows, not the bedrock of proof. And it is here, in this labyrinth of law, that the tale takes its most soul-crushing twist. As the specter of a trial loomed, the defense attorneys for Victor and Megan unleashed a legal onslaught, a storm of motions aimed at shattering the prosecution's case. They cried that the 35-year chasm in time had desecrated their client's right to a swift trial. They cast doubt upon the sacred chain of custody for evidence, entombed since 1989. They assailed the very notion of modern science reaching back to decipher the secrets of decades-old specimens. They argued that memory, after 35 years, was a treacherous, fading tapestry, utterly unworthy of trust. In the sweltering August of 2024, a judge presided over the clash of these pretrial titans. The defense painted a grim portrait, a case starved of substance, where the sheer weight of passing years had rendered a fair trial an impossibility. Too many voices were now silenced by the grave, too many minds clouded by the mists of time. The physical remnants of the past, they claimed, had decayed into dust and doubt. The original inquiry had been a tapestry of errors, its threads now too tangled to ever be undone. The prosecution, a righteous force led by District Attorney Rebecca Wilson, struck back with thunderous resolve. She proclaimed that though the case was ancient, the evidence remained a potent, damning chorus, its song pointing directly to the accused. She invoked the name of Justin Lee Turner, a child who deserved his day in court, arguing that the defendants should not be shielded by the very years they had allegedly filled with unholy silence. But on the 21st of August, 2024, Judge William Harrison rendered a verdict that was not a verdict, a decision that struck Justin's family like a physical blow. He granted the defense's motion, and with the stroke of a pen, the charges against Victor and Megan Turner dissolved into nothingness. The judge decreed that the evidence, while casting a long and chilling shadow of suspicion, failed to clear the impossibly high bar for a criminal trial. It was a mosaic of circumstance, and the 35-year winter had frozen the reliability of both human memory and physical proof. Furthermore, Judge Harrison spoke of the tangled specter of double jeopardy, of the state's very ability to forge a case that could survive the crucible of reasonable doubt. He drew a stark, brutal line in the sand, emphasizing that the whispers of reasonable suspicion could never be mistaken for the roar of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the only currency accepted in the halls of criminal conviction. The charges were annihilated. Victor Turner and Megan Turner tasted freedom. The aftermath was a firestorm of immediate, searing anguish. Justin's family was utterly hollowed out. After a lifetime of yearning, they had glimpsed the shores of justice, only to have the prize ripped from their grasp by the cold mechanics of the law. Sarah Parsons' statement was a lament for a world broken. The truth is a ghost in the room, but justice is blind to it. We know who ended Justin's life. The evidence screams their names. But the system, the great system, has failed him. Sheriff Lewis, his disappointment, a palpable shroud, maintained a stoic, professional front. This is not the destination we fought so hard to reach, he conceded at a press conference. Yet, we are bound to the tangled realities of these old, cold cases. We stand unwavering by our investigation and our belief that we found the ones responsible for Justin's final breath. District Attorney Wilson spoke of the grim truth that sometimes the river of time flows too far, washing away the path to justice, especially when the foundation of a case is cracked. The blunders and blindness of 1989 cannot be healed by the vision of 2024, she stated, her words a painful eulogy. It is a brutal lesson in the vital importance of getting it right from the very first dawn. Victor Turner, speaking through the shield of his lawyer, spun a narrative of himself as a casualty, a man caught in the blinding glare of law enforcement's narrow gaze. Bad people made bad choices in 1989, and that poisoned the well for the good people, he claimed, a veiled accusation that the police had chased a phantom while the true killer slipped away. His attorney hammered home the idea that Victor was innocent, a man cleared of all sin. Though the truth was more complex, the case was dismissed, never having faced the fire of a trial. I need to know, have the whispers of this case reached you? Because this is a tragedy where the truth feels as solid as the earth beneath our feet, yet it crumbled to dust before it could ever be proven in a court of law. So where does this leave the ghost of Justin Lee Turner? Officially, his murder is a story without an end, a cold, unsolved riddle. No one wears the title of his killer. The case file is sealed, not by conviction, but by dismissal, and the unbreachable fortress of double jeopardy ensures Victor and Megan will never face this charge again. But in the unofficial court, in the hearts of Monk's Corner, in the souls of Justin's family, and in the minds of the investigators who chased his shadow, the verdict is clear. They believe they know precisely who silenced that 5-year-old boy. They believe the evidence paints a portrait so vivid it needs no signature, even if it lacked the legal weight to be hung on a courtroom wall. A dismissal of charges is not a declaration of innocence in the unforgiving court of public opinion. The Turner case became a haunting ballad of justice, unfulfilled, a chilling testament to how the coldest cases, even when forced into the light, can leave a family's heart in eternal shadow. The relentless march of time is not merely a thief of memory and evidence. It is a shield wielded by the guilty to escape the final, righteous reckoning. For Justin's kin, the war now wages on a different front. They are the keepers of his flame, tending his memory on social media, in yearly vigils, in conversations just like this one, ensuring the world never forgets the boy who was lost. They have found a fragile peace with the idea that earthly justice is a fleeting dream, holding fast to the faith that a final, perfect judgment awaits in a realm beyond our own. If Victor and Megan are guilty, they will face their creator, a family member vowed in the wake of the dismissal. We may be denied justice in this life, but there is a higher court, one that cannot be deceived by silver-tongued lawyers and legal loopholes. Michael Smith, the boy who was Justin's other half, still makes the pilgrimage to his friend's grave. He speaks to Justin as if he were standing right there, sharing the chapters of a life Justin never got to live, of marriage, of children. He tells him of a town that has never let his memory fade. And yes, etched into his skin is the face of his lost friend, a permanent testament to a bond severed in the cruelest innocence of childhood. Justin was laid to his eternal rest in Somerville Cemetery, nestled in Dorchester County, South Carolina. His grave is a small, sacred island, never barren of flowers or humble toys, left by those who carry his story in their hearts. Even strangers, touched by the tragedy, will sometimes pause there to offer a moment of silence, to honor a little life that held the promise of so much more. His mother, Jennifer, rests not far from him. The family imagines them reunited, that Jennifer's arms, empty for so long, are finally holding her son again. For 15 years, she was a warrior, a mother on a relentless quest for his killer, her spirit unyielding. When she passed in 2004, her family said the endless grief had weathered her soul, but they knew her love and her fight for Justin had never, for 1 second, faltered. The shockwaves of Justin's case radiated through Berkeley County for generations. Parents, who were children themselves, in 1989, recall it as the day the world changed. The boundless freedom they knew of playing until dusk, of wandering to a friend's house, of bike rides through the neighborhood, it all vanished, like a dream upon waking. Their own parents became sentinels, gripped by a new and terrible fear. In many ways, this was Justin's legacy, the violent end of innocence for an entire community. Even today, in 2024 and beyond, parents in that corner of the world pass down the warnings: be careful, be aware, understand how swiftly the world can turn dark, even in the places that feel like home. They don't always speak Justin's name, but his story is the ghost that haunts those conversations, a cautionary tale made all the more terrifying because it is true. There are profound lessons etched into Justin's story, brutal truths about trust, about danger, about the chilling reality that evil can wear the mask of a friend. The one who harmed Justin was not some monster from a fairy tale, lurking in the woods. According to the evidence, the horror came from inside his own home, from the very people sworn to be his protectors. It is a truth that is agonizing to confront, but one that is vital to comprehend. If you're a guardian of the young, you must learn to trust the primal whisper of your instincts about those who walk among your children. Most souls are kind, but some are cloaked in darkness. Heed the crimson flags, the behaviors that strike a discordant note, the scenarios that scream of wrongness in the silent chambers of your heart. Do not be lulled by a pleasant face, for evil rarely announces its own name. And if you are a young person listening, know this: your voice has power. It is your sacred right to speak up when something feels wrong. If someone makes your skin crawl, if they ask you to harbor their dark secrets, if their touch feels like a violation, you must tell another adult. Tell and keep telling until someone finally hears you and offers you sanctuary. Justin was too small to save himself, but you can learn to see the shadows and run toward the light. For our communities, Justin's case is a searing indictment of passive safety. Monk's Corner was a town where everyone knew your name, a place where people believed that familiarity was a shield. But knowing a face is not the same as seeing a soul in trouble. True community safety is an active, vigilant pact, a willingness to raise our voices when we see something that fractures the peace. And for law enforcement, this case stands as a stark monument to the absolute necessity of a flawless, meticulous investigation from the very first hour. The errors and omissions of 1989 became the ghosts that haunted this case for 35 years. Evidence that could have been a beacon was never gathered. Questions that could have unlocked the truth were never asked. Forensic tools, even those available then, were left in the box. Those initial failures made justice a near impossible dream decades down the line. Today's cold case squads are performing miracles, breathing life into old ghosts with new science. Sheriff Lewis, Detective Martinez, and their entire team did everything by the book in their second quest for justice. They were brilliant, dedicated, and relentless, but even they could not outrun the original sins of a flawed investigation. It is the most painful reminder that in the pursuit of truth, we never get a second chance to make a first impression. Let a 2 echo in the comments if you foresaw the earth-shattering twist of dismissed charges, for I doubt a single soul could have predicted such a verdict after 3.5 decades of haunted silence. Today, Justin Lee Turner would be a man of 40 years, his life a tapestry woven with the threads of a career, a family, the laughter of his own children. Perhaps he would have remained under the South Carolina sun, or maybe sought a new dawn elsewhere. A teacher, a builder, a dreamer painting his world with color. Any path was possible. But the book of his life was slammed shut, its pages stolen when he was a mere 5 years old. What we hold as truth is the constellation of love that surrounded Justin. He was a gentle soul with a bashful smile, a boy whose world was filled with the sweet taste of cinnamon cereal and adventures with his best friend, Michael. The thrill of kindergarten, of a universe of knowledge opening before him, was a tangible spark. He was a son, a grandson, a cousin, a friend, a life that mattered deeply then, and whose echo still resounds in the hearts of strangers who have heard his tragic tale. But a judge's decree cannot erase the mountains of work moved to solve this chilling case. Sheriff Lewis and his relentless team journeyed where the evidence beckoned. They forged a case from the fires of their conviction, fortified by the cold, hard facts of forensic science and tireless investigation. Whether the gavel fell in their favor or not, they laid their very best at the feet of Justin and his grieving family. And that devotion, that refusal to surrender, means everything. The family carries the knowledge that someone cared enough to wage war against time itself after 35 years. They know Justin's name was not a whisper lost to a dusty file cabinet. There were warriors who looked upon that little boy's file and declared, "He deserves a reckoning, and we will be his sword and shield." Even in the shadow of a devastating legal outcome, that monumental effort shines as a beacon. Justice is a labyrinth, a complex and shadowed maze. The very shields designed to protect the innocent can, in a cruel twist of fate, become the armor of the guilty. There are moments when a mountain of evidence, pointing like 1,000 fingers in one direction, is still not enough. And sometimes, time, the great revealer, becomes a thief, stealing the very essence of truth. Yet, the absence of a conviction is not the absence of truth. In the court of human reason, many who have descended into the depths of this case believe they have seen the face of what happened to Justin Lee Turner. They have pieced together the fragments, the evidence, the timelines, the chilling behaviors, and have arrived at a verdict of the soul, even if it could not be forged in the fires of a courtroom. Perhaps, in the end, this must be enough. Perhaps the quiet certainty of truth, a flicker of light when legal justice remains in shadow, offers its own fragile peace. Maybe the ultimate triumph is not in a verdict, but in the telling of Justin's story, in the honoring of his stolen life, in the enduring flame of compassion that burns for him decades after he was silenced. His family has vowed an eternal fight, a crusade in his name. They are the keepers of his memory, the champions for awareness, the sanctuary for other families lost in the same storm of trauma. They have forged purpose from the ashes of their pain, transforming their grief into a powerful voice for the voiceless. If justice for Justin remains elusive, they will move heaven and earth to bring it to others. This is the very reason the Cold Case Desk exists, to cast a defiant light into the darkest corners of unsolved mysteries, to ensure the names of the forgotten are spoken like a prayer, to hold the feet of the system to the fire. Every share, every comment, every single person who learns Justin's story breathes new life into his memory and stokes the embers of this vital conversation. And who can say what the future holds? Perhaps down the long, winding road of time, a new piece of the puzzle will surface. A guilty conscience may finally break its silence. A confession may be whispered on a final breath. The relentless march of technology may one day unlock secrets from 1989 that are currently beyond our grasp. The annals of cold cases are filled with stranger resurrections. Until that day, we remember Justin Lee Turner. We become the vessel for his story. We stare into the abyss of his unjust death and the maddening dissonance of a verdict that defies the evidence. We stand with his family in their unending battle, and we learn, hoping that from the tragedy of his case, we can build a shield to protect another child from the same fate. This chronicle is born from true events that sent shockwaves through the heart of a community. While some details have been sculpted for narrative and names altered to guard what privacy remains, the core of this tragedy is brutally real. The agony of his family is real. The fractures and failings of our justice system are real. And the sacred duty to remember victims, like Justin, is the most real thing of all. If this story has left its mark upon you, then join our ranks by subscribing to this channel. We delve into the cases that echo in the soul, the stories that demand to be told, the crusades where families still wage war for answers. Strike the notification bell so you never miss a single investigation, and send this story into the world to anyone who seeks to understand the tangled, heartbreaking complexities of the search for truth. Now, I turn to you. Let your voice be heard in the comments below. Did the evidence paint a true portrait of the suspects? Did the judge's gavel fall on the side of justice? Or was it a catastrophic error? If you held the investigator's badge, what path would you have taken? I descend into every comment, for your insights are the lifeblood of this quest. In our next descent, we unearth another case, frozen in time for decades, until a single, shocking revelation shattered the ice. It is a story where the ghost in the machine DNA finally pointed its unerring finger at a killer hidden in the light of day. You will not want to turn away. But for now, let us hold a moment of silence in honor of Justin Lee Turner, a life of 5 short years, a light extinguished far too soon, but a memory that will never fade. Rest in peace, little one. Your story has been etched into our hearts, and there, your memory will live forever. Our second chapter begins where the last breath of the first was drawn, plunging deeper into the swirling vortex of the aftermath, the scars left on a community, and the chilling implications of Justin Lee Turner's unresolved saga. The years that followed the gavel's fall were a tangled web of consequence for all who were caught within. The Berkeley County Sheriff's Office was left standing on precarious ground, having declared their suspects to the world, forged a case from their deepest convictions, only to see it crumble to dust on the winds of legal technicality. For the investigators who had poured their very souls into this case, it was a wound that would not close. Detective Sarah Martinez, the very face of this renewed crusade, felt the blow like a physical impact. She had sacrificed untold hours to the ghosts in those files, retracing old steps with witnesses, seeking truth in the cold language of science. She had stared into the innocent eyes of a smiling 5-year-old in one photograph, and then into the unspeakable horror of another. That kind of juxtaposition brands a soul, haunts the quiet hours of the night, and forces one to question the very fabric of humanity. The evidence spoke its own truth, Martinez declared to a local news outlet, her voice a steel blade against the backdrop of defeat. I know what was done to that little boy, and I know we bled for this case, to drag his demons into the light. The system is a fickle beast. Sometimes it finds its mark, and sometimes it fails. This was a failure, but it does not change the truth of what we uncovered. Her defiant words struck a chord, echoing through the digital halls where the case was being dissected. The online true crime world, which had ignited with interest at the news of the arrests, was now fractured. A civil war of opinion erupted. Some argued that insufficient evidence meant a flawed accusation, while others cried foul, insisting that the guilty had slipped through the cracks of the law, shielded by the passage of time. The debate became a firestorm across forums, podcasts, and the sprawling universe of social media. Armchair detectives performed a digital autopsy on every available shred of information, constructing timelines, scrutinizing every word, and battling over forensic interpretations. Some, driven by an insatiable need for answers, even made a pilgrimage to Berkeley County, walking the ground where tragedy struck, though the Turner property was now a ghost, bearing no resemblance to the scene from 1989. In the heart of this digital storm was Sarah Parsons, Justin's cousin, now the family's unwavering voice. She navigated these turbulent online waters, grateful for the spotlight, but exhausted by the endless battle of defending her family's truth, of explaining the bedrock of their belief in Victor and Megan's guilt, even after the law had looked away. Strangers, people who never breathed that air, who haven't seen the shadows in the evidence, they want to spin their own tales, Sarah confessed in a haunting podcast interview. And I understand the fascination, the human need to solve the puzzle. But for us, this isn't a game. This is the blood of my cousin. This is the story of my aunt, whose heart literally broke because she died without seeing justice for her only son. And her words cut to the very soul of the matter. The phenomenon of true crime, for all its noble intentions, can sometimes cast a shadow over the profound human suffering at its core. Every case file is a testament to a stolen life, a shattered family, a wounded community. Justin was not a character in a dark fable. He was a little boy who knew terror and pain, and for whom real hearts were still aching 35 years into the void. Let me know in the comments which ghost you want us to chase next. And tell me, do you believe these digital communities are a beacon of hope for cold cases, or do they simply muddy the waters? For the Turners, life after the dismissal was a new kind of prison. Victor Turner, now a man in his mid-60s, was adrift in a strange purgatory. By law, he was a free man, shielded from ever facing the same accusation again. But in the relentless court of public opinion, the verdict was already in. His name was now forever branded, inextricably linked to the murder of his own son. Victor took to the airwaves, a man painting himself as the final victim in this tragedy, steadfast in his declarations of innocence. He spun a tale of a wrongful accusation, of being a scapegoat for desperate investigators, eager to close a festering wound of a case. The true monster, he claimed, still roamed free, while the police had squandered 3.5 decades chasing shadows. My son was stolen from me in a nightmare from which I've never woken, Victor lamented in one interview, his voice heavy with grievance. And then, after decades of carrying that cross, they tried to nail me to it. Can you fathom what that does to a man's soul? To live with the agony of his death for 35 years, only to be forced to fight the monstrous claim that my own hands were responsible. It has been a living hell. His words were a lit match to the raw fury of Justin's maternal family. They saw not a grieving father, but a monster cloaked in victimhood, a puppeteer of public sympathy, spinning a web of lies to save his own skin. Sarah Parsons, a warrior in this war of words, took to the digital battlefield, her posts a barrage of detailed rebuttals, a stark reminder of the damning evidence that first ensnared him. Do not let the serpent charm you. Sarah's words blazed across the screen after Victor's televised plea. This is a man who, the evidence screams, extinguished the life of his own son, concealed his tiny body while a frantic world searched. And now he begs for pity because the curtain fell on his act? No. 1,000 times, no. Meanwhile, Megan Turner, the woman once known as Pamela, vanished into a self-imposed exile. No interviews, no public pronouncements, only a deafening silence as she sought the solace of obscurity. She had shed her name years before, a desperate attempt to sever ties with the past, to build a new life far from the ghosts of South Carolina. But the indictment had been a spectral hand, dragging her back into the heart of a nightmare she thought she had escaped forever. After the storm of dismissal, Megan simply evaporated from the public eye. A sterile statement from her lawyer spoke of relief and pleaded for privacy, but from Megan herself, there was nothing, a void. And into that void, speculation rushed. Some saw her silence as a confession etched in absence. Surely, an innocent soul would scream their truth from the rooftops. Others saw a woman shattered, seeking refuge from the glare of a world that had branded her with a horrific crime. The truth, of course, remains a ghost, forever unknowable. We cannot peer into the haunted chambers of Megan's mind. Does she lie awake, pursued by the spectre of what happened? Does the echo of Justin's name haunt the long, dark hours of the night? Is she a victim, wrongly accused and forever scarred, or a victor, relieved to have slipped the grasp of justice? Without her voice, all we have are whispers in the dark. But what is not a whisper, what is etched in stone, is the seismic shift this case sent through the world of law enforcement. Sheriff Christopher Lewis, forged in the crucible of this tragedy, emerged as a champion for the forgotten, a voice for the cold cases gathering dust. He carried the saga of Justin Turner to conferences, a chilling parable of brilliant investigative work, tragically undermined by the ghosts of past failures. Our reinvestigation was a masterclass in modern justice, Lewis declared, his voice echoing in a hall of his peers. My team was relentless, professional, a force of dedication. We unleashed the full power of forensic science. We followed the trail of evidence into the darkest corners. And yet, we were shackled by the errors of 1989, chains we could not break. The lesson is carved in this failure: get it right the first time, because a second chance is a grace you may never be afforded. His words were not merely heard, they were a shockwave. Across the nation, police departments began to unearth their own archives, re-examining evidence protocols, dissecting their first response procedures, rewriting the very training that shaped their officers. If nothing else, Justin's tragic story became a catalyst, a grim inspiration for improvements that might one day solve the unsolvable or prevent another child's story from ever going cold. The forensic world, too, was captivated by the case's chilling anatomy. The grotesque detail of Justin's body, held in the cold embrace of a refrigerator before its final concealment, became a haunting lesson in pathology classrooms. How does one read the secrets of post-mortem refrigeration? What cryptic signs must an investigator seek? What does it reveal about the predator's mind, their access, their cold, calculated planning? Justin's case offered a real-world grimoire for these dark sciences. Forensic psychologists descended into the case's twisted psyche, dissecting the unholy trinity of violence, violation, and the brazen charade of an abduction. What breed of monster commits such an act? How does one profile a killer who can extinguish a child's life within their own sanctuary, then walk among the searchers, their face a mask of feigned concern? The behavioral tapestry was a masterpiece of clinical fascination and a portrait of human horror. But while the professionals studied the case's bones, Justin's family and friends were left to live with the ghost. For Michael Smith, Justin's childhood shadow, the weight of that fateful Friday morning in 1989 never lessened. He was just 7 years old when his best friend vanished from the bus stop, a moment that became the dark sun around which the rest of his life would orbit. Not a day goes by that he isn't with me, Michael confessed in an interview, his voice thick with the years, a man now in his 30s. I wonder who he would have become. Would we still be inseparable? What would his life have been? And I see myself back there, a little boy standing on that curb, waiting, never knowing that the world had already been shattered. The years brought therapy, a search for solace from the trauma, and a guilt that clung to him like a shroud. Survivor's guilt. The clinicians named it, that insidious, irrational whisper that he should have known, should have done something. His therapist armed him with logic. He was only 7 years old, a child powerless against an adult's monstrous heart. He was not to blame, but the chasm between knowing a truth and feeling it is a universe wide. Michael still bore that impossible weight. A tattoo of Justin's face, etched forever onto his calf, was both a shrine and a scar, a permanent testament to a bond severed by violence, and a solemn vow to never, ever forget. Several times a year, he made the pilgrimage to Justin's grave, especially on the boy's birthday and the anniversary of his theft from the world. He would bring flowers, small trinkets, sometimes a letter penned to his lost friend, a chronicle of a life Justin never got to live. To an outsider, it might seem a strange ritual, but for Michael, it was a lifeline. A way to keep a flicker of Justin's spirit alive, to bridge the silent expanse between the living and the dead. I tell him about my kids, Michael shared, his voice a fragile thing. I have 2 boys now, And I tell Justin all about them. I tell him how they would have adored their Uncle Justin. I tell him about my wife, my job, all the stupid, beautiful things that make up a life. I talk to him as if he can hear me, because in my heart, he's never really left. Entik Ken. This is the enduring echo of love and grief, a lament common to those who lose someone to the sudden, brutal hand of murder, especially in the bloom of youth. The relationship is frozen in amber. Michael, forever 7. Justin, forever 5, in that final, stolen moment. But Michael grew, aged, and walked through life, carrying his friend with him, a precious, heartbreaking memory. Unleash that subscribe button if you crave more tales from the abyss, because we are about to journey into the shadow this case cast over an entire generation of children in Berkeley County. The children who were Justin's age in the year 1989 are now adults, their 40s etched upon their faces. They were raised in the long, cold shadow of his murder by parents who suddenly saw monsters lurking behind every tree. That generation of Berkeley County kids lived a different childhood, one bound by tighter leashes, more restrictions, and a chilling, premature awareness of the world's darkness. Some don't even carry a clear memory of Justin himself, but they remember the fear that descended like a fog after he was gone. They remember the end of walking to a friend's house alone, the new, invisible fences that confined them to their yards, the constant, urgent litany. Never talk to strangers, never get in a car. They remember the jumpiness in their parents' eyes, an overprotective fervor that seemed suffocating then, but makes a terrifying kind of sense now. I was 6 when it happened, recalls Amanda Richardson, who lived just a few miles from the Turner home in 1989. I didn't know him, but I remember the world changing. Suddenly, my mom wouldn't let me play outside unless I was a silhouette in her window. My bike rides around the block were over, and she'd get this look, this distant, haunted expression that I couldn't comprehend until I was older, until I had my own children to protect. Amanda's story became the anthem for a generation. The murder of Justin Turner drew a stark line in the timeline of Berkeley County parenting. Before Justin, there was a kingdom of childhood freedom. After Justin, parents clung tighter, their trust in the world fractured, their days filled with a new and constant hum of worry. It was an innocence lost, not just for a community, but for an entire cohort of children who grew up with less freedom because of one unspeakable act. Now, those children are parents themselves, raising their own families in an age hyper-aware of every conceivable danger. They are the helicopter parents, in part, because they were the first to be hovered over in the wake of Justin's death. The tremors of trauma can echo across generations, reshaping the very instincts of how we love, protect, and fear for our children. Psychologists studying the anatomy of community trauma turned their gaze to Berkeley County, treating it as a living case study. How does a small town metabolize the poison of a child's murder? What are the deep, lingering psychological scars on children and adults alike? And how does the absence of resolution, no conviction, no final justice, cripple the healing process? The answers were a tangled knot. For some, the charges in 2024, though ultimately dismissed, felt like a breath of life, a sign that someone, somewhere, was still fighting for Justin. For others, the dismissal was a cruel reopening of a barely healed wound, a final, bitter confirmation that justice was a phantom. There was no unified voice, for the community was not a monolith. It was a collection of fractured hearts, each processing the trauma in its own solitary way. Yet, through the discord, a single, mournful chord rang true. Justin was remembered. Remembered with a profound sadness and a strange communal affection, even by those who never knew his smile. His story was woven into the fabric of local lore, a tragic chapter every soul in Berkeley County knew by heart. It was passed from neighbor to new resident, from parent to child, a shared, cultural memory of a time when darkness fell. For many years, Whitesville Elementary, the school Justin briefly attended, held a small memorial in his honor. A simple plaque, his bright face smiling out, with a quiet plea for remembrance. It was removed during a renovation, a decision that sparked a fresh wave of grief in those who felt he was being erased. But the principal at the time offered a different perspective. The memorial had served its purpose, she argued, and true remembrance lived not on a wall, but in the heart. Still, a memorial is a powerful anchor. It provides a physical nexus for grief, a hallowed ground where memory can be touched and shared. Justin's grave offered that solace for some, but a cemetery is not a place everyone can, or will, go. And so, a quiet wish lingered among former classmates and neighbors for another place, a different kind of shrine to honor the boy they lost. In the years that followed the legal system's final, frustrating chapter, a new idea began to bloom. Some in the community proposed a park, or perhaps a playground, to be built in Justin's name, a place of safety and laughter, of joyous shouts and carefree play, named for a child whose own childhood was so brutally stolen. It was a vision of turning unimaginable tragedy into something beautiful and life-affirming. The proposal sparked a firestorm of debate. Some embraced the idea with fierce passion, ready to raise funds and break ground. Others recoiled, arguing it was a painful, constant reminder that would pick at the wound instead of letting it scar over. Even Justin's own family was torn. Some saw it as a beautiful tribute, a legacy of light, while others felt no park could ever balance the scales, preferring to channel their grief in quieter, more private ways. Even now, as this story is told, the vision for that playground remains a ghost, a promise unfulfilled, though the whispers of its purpose endure a testament to the sacred, agonizing debates that rise from the ashes of communal trauma. If this chilling saga has gripped your soul, let the like button be your witness, for we must now descend into the labyrinth of law and the shadowed ethics of this case. The gavels fall, dismissing all charges against Victor and Megan Turner, unleashed a phantom that haunts the justice system, the specter of ancient crimes. For murder, in theory, knows no statute of limitations. Time itself cannot grant a killer sanctuary, but time is also a thief, and the realities of prosecuting a 35-year-old crime are a mountain of dust. Witnesses are claimed by the grave, evidence surrenders to decay, and memories, once sharp as glass, warp into mirages. It was upon this shifting sand that Judge William Harrison built his decree, finding the evidence, a haunting suggestion, a whisper of guilt, but not the deafening roar required for conviction, for it fell short of that sacred standard, beyond a reasonable doubt. Was his judgment true? The answer is a fractured mirror, reflecting a different reality to every eye that dares to look. To the prosecution, it was a tapestry of circumstance, woven tightly enough for any jury. To the defense, a frayed and faded cloth of prejudice and time. What became tragically clear was the chasm between our thirst for accountability and the sacred shields forged to protect the innocent from the system's terrible power. Yet, those very shields, meant to guard the blameless, can become a cloak for the guilty. The system is built on the noble, chilling principle that it is better for 10 guilty souls to walk free than for one innocent life to be wrongly condemned. The Turner case was thus etched into the annals of law, a cautionary tale whispered in the hallowed halls of justice, forever shaping the debate. What specter of proof is required to charge a ghost from decades past? And then there is the investigator's crucible, when you believe you have stared into the eyes of a killer but cannot prove the darkness you see. Do you cast the stone of public accusation? Sheriff Lewis stood defiant, his resolve unyielding. "We followed the phantom trail of evidence," he declared. "Justice demands we take the shot, even when the target is shrouded in the mists of time." But a chorus of dissent rose, crying that to drag Victor and Megan Turner through the public inferno, only to release them, was a cruel spectacle, a punishment delivered not by a jury, but by the court of opinion. These are the Gordian knots of morality, tangled dilemmas with no easy answers. The Turner case resides in that agonizing purgatory, not a total failure, but a hollow victory where no one was ever held to account. Now, let us pull back the veil and gaze upon a darker tapestry, for Justin's story, as shattering as it is woven with threads of a pattern seen in countless other tragedies. The grim arithmetic of loss tells a chilling truth. The monster that steals a child is rarely a stranger in the shadows, but a familiar face, a trusted hand, a presence from within their own sacred circle. In the fractured homes where such horrors are born, a constellation of sorrows often appears. The crushing weight of financial ruin, the venom of discord, the ghosts of addiction, all escalating toward a final, fatal violence. And the portrait of Justin's final hours, as painted by the cold case team, mirrored this dark and tragically familiar blueprint, a tale of a life extinguished within the home, hidden behind a carefully crafted lie. The violation against his innocence added another, more disturbing layer, a secret kept through the currency of fear and manipulation, a darkness that can fester for years until it explodes into murder. Those who map the twisted landscapes of the human soul have identified the archetypes of this evil: the overwhelmed soul who snaps, the sadistic predator who savors the pain, and the desperate concealer willing to silence a victim forever. Which mask did Justin's killer wear? The evidence whispers of a cold, calculated design, the chilling, the hiding, the elaborate deception suggesting a predator's deliberation, not a fleeting burst of rage. Share this with anyone captivated by the shadows of the human heart, for we now turn to the legacy of fear and the fortress of protection built in Justin's name. From the ashes of such profound loss, a new world of caution was born. Some changes were beacons of progress. Others, critics claim, were gilded cages built from fear, limiting freedom without truly offering safety. After Justin's light was extinguished, the open doors of schools in Berkeley County and across the nation were sealed with new rituals of vigilance, the age of innocence giving way to an age of suspicion. The sentinels of child welfare, the agents of protective services, sharpened their swords, their resolve hardened by the ghosts of children they had failed to save from the system's cracks. But a sword swung with too much force can sever the bonds of family, tearing children from homes where they were loved and safe, a tragedy of good intentions gone awry. A new web of watchers was woven by law, compelling teachers, doctors, and healers to become unwilling heralds of suspected darkness, bound by duty to report any shadow of abuse. Yet this net of vigilance is only as strong as its threads. It is a system built on whispers and glimpses, where true abuse is missed and a child's terrified silence can become their tomb. A new gospel of safety was preached from every corner, a litany of warnings against strangers and the poisoned secrets of bad touch, becoming a standard lesson in the curriculum of childhood. But the wise cried out that we were teaching our children to fear the distant wolf, while ignoring the one already inside the fold, arming them against phantoms, while leaving them vulnerable to the real monsters they know and trust. And now, our modern-day campfires, the podcasts, the streams, the flickering screens, tell these tales of terror to a captivated world. But does this endless recounting arm us with wisdom, or merely shroud us in a deeper, more paralyzing fear? Was this justice? Let your voice be heard in the comments below, as we descend into the very heart of what that word even signifies when a life is stolen. As the courthouse doors swung shut, dismissing all charges against Victor and Megan Turner, a wave of devastation crashed over Justin's family, their cries echoing a single lament. Justice was not served. But what is the shape of justice for a child taken from this world? Is it merely the cold steel of prison bars, or does its soul lie somewhere deeper? By the stark, unyielding letter of the law, justice is a simple, brutal equation: find the guilty, prove their sin, and lock them away from the light. By this cold calculus, Justin's story is a catastrophic failure. No conviction was won. No shadow falls behind prison walls for his loss. In the dusty archives of the law, his case is a ghost unsolved. Yet, some whisper of a different kind of justice, one not etched in law books, but in the unshakable certainty of truth. A justice found in dragging the terrible facts into the light, in naming the specters responsible, even if they never face a gavel's fall. And by that measure, a victory was clawed from the darkness. Investigators painted a chilling portrait with their evidence, and in the court of public conviction, a verdict was rendered long before the judge ever spoke. Perhaps justice is also a sacred act of remembrance, a vow to keep a soul from fading into the silence. It is the hallowed duty of honoring a life, of weaving a story with reverence so that a name is never lost to the cold anonymity of a case file. His family has waged this war against forgetting, a defiant form of justice that screams he was more than a number, more than a statistic. And then there is the path of restorative justice, a concept that seeks not vengeance but the mending of a shattered world. It dreams of a moment where the guilty soul confesses, takes the weight of their actions, and offers the family a chance at peace. A dream that, for Justin, remained agonizingly out of reach. Yet, it's a haunting reminder that true justice must also serve the living, tending to the wounds that never truly close. When the halls of earthly justice fall silent, some turn their eyes to the heavens, clinging to the belief in a final, divine reckoning, a belief that a higher court will one day convene, where no sin goes unjudged. Justin's family has held this faith as a shield, a solemn promise that if Victor and Megan are guilty, they will face an ultimate judgment. It is a sanctuary of solace when the world of men proves broken. But let us cast aside the poetry for a moment and face the brutal truth. No philosophy can resurrect the dead or mend a heart torn in two. His mother, Jennifer, poured 15 years of her life into a desperate crusade for answers, only to go to her grave with an empty soul. His cousin Sarah has weathered decades of this storm, only to watch the ship of justice splinter and sink. And Michael Smith stands before a cold stone, whispering to a ghost who can no longer answer. They say justice delayed is justice denied, a promise that withers on the vine. For Justin, justice was delayed for so long it became a phantom, an impossibility. The missteps of the 1989 investigation became insurmountable walls, casting shadows that even 35 years of progress could not pierce. This is not merely a failure for one boy. It is a chilling testament to the truth that the first moments of a tragedy forever dictate its end. In the end, the shape of justice is a reflection in a shattered mirror, different for every soul who dares to look. Ask 10 different people, and you will hear 10 different prayers. But from the fragments, a few sacred truths emerge. Truth is the light, accountability is the anchor, and a stolen life must be honored, always. Now, let us turn our gaze to the blinding spotlight of the media, a force that can illuminate the path to truth or burn everything in its wake. For in the telling of these dark tales, real lives hang in the balance. The moment charges were filed in 2024, a media firestorm erupted. Local news crews descended, national television shows broadcast his face into millions of homes, podcast hosts whispered his name into countless ears, and a digital army of YouTubers dissected every shred of evidence, their theories echoing across the internet. For Justin's family, this sudden glare was a treacherous ally, a blade with two sharp edges. One side was a weapon for justice, keeping his name on the lips of the public and the powerful, a constant pressure on the system. It was a light that Sarah Parsons welcomed, for it kept his memory from the encroaching darkness. But the other edge of that blade cut deep. The endless chatter, the grim dissection of his final moments, the wild speculation it was a public autopsy of their private grief. Each new headline, each fresh podcast, was a fresh wound, forcing them to relive the single worst day of their lives again and again. And here we find the deep ethical chasm in the world of true crime. Some storytellers approached Justin's case with the reverence of a historian, sticking to the facts, honoring his humanity, and treading softly around the family's pain. But others descended like vultures, feasting on the most gruesome details for shock value, spinning baseless theories, and packaging a family's nightmare as primetime entertainment. They have a name for it: murder-rainment, a chilling fusion of real-life horror and mass entertainment. And while we understand the pull, the need to gaze into the abyss, a sacred line exists between bearing witness and pure exploitation. It is a line that is blurred and then crossed with terrifying frequency. In this treacherous new world, Justin's family had to become strategists. They needed the media's power, but feared its poison, the way it could twist his story into grotesque clickbait. Sarah Parsons stood as a fierce guardian at the gate, granting access only to those she deemed worthy and publicly shaming the storytellers who dishonored his memory. This is the tightrope that every victim's family must now walk. How do you command the storm of public interest without being swept away by it? How do you feed the beast of the media without letting it devour your soul? How do you fight the lies without giving them more oxygen? There are creators who navigate this darkness with a conscience, who see themselves as advocates, not entertainers. They are the ones who speak with families, who treat facts as sacred, who wield their platforms as instruments for justice. These are the voices in the wilderness, the ones who truly deserve to be heard. But for every one of them, there are others who chase clicks and currency above all else. They build empires on speculation, sensationalism, and the commodification of grief. Their work is a poison that seeps into the public consciousness, spreading lies that can derail justice and inflict fresh trauma upon families already broken by loss. And this is where the responsibility shifts to us, the audience. We must become discerning consumers of tragedy. We must ask ourselves, does this honor the fallen? Is this built on a foundation of truth or the shifting sands of speculation? Is this a quest for understanding or merely a spectacle of suffering for our amusement? Our engagement, too, carries weight. A casual comment, "This is insane," might seem innocent, but imagine you are the mother of that child, seeing the absolute worst moment of your existence reduced to a fleeting piece of online entertainment. We can be fascinated by the darkness without losing our compassion for those who were consumed by it. Tell us where you're watching from in the world and lend your voice to this crucial debate. Is the true crime phenomenon a force for good or a destructive power in the hunt for justice? Let us now pull back the curtain on the ghost-haunted world of cold cases to understand the formidable demons of the past that conspired to keep Justin's killer in the shadows. The first specter to rise was the original investigation in 1989. Though Lieutenant Richardson's team fought with the tools they had, fatal errors were made oversights that would become vengeful ghosts, haunting every future effort. The sacred ground of the crime scene was not perfectly preserved. The camper, a tomb, was not sealed with the reverence and precision it demanded. They were working in a fog, for the science of forensics, in 1989, was a flickering candle against the darkness of today's blazing Sunday. DNA, the oracle of modern justice, was then just a whispered prophecy, a crude and nascent power few could even wield. Fingerprints yielded only faint secrets, and the digital world of clues simply did not exist. And so, the evidence lay dormant, its secrets locked away. Biological traces, which would scream a confession in 2024, were mute artifacts in 1989. Hairs and fibers, now rich with narrative, were then just silent witnesses. The technological abyss of that era created a chasm in time, a wound that 3 decades of innovation could never fully heal. Time, the relentless thief, also stole the certainty of memory. The human mind is not a perfect record. It is a decaying tapestry. After 35 years, the threads of what happened on March 3rd, 1989, were frayed and tangled, a dreamlike landscape of half-truths and phantom recollections. As defense attorneys argued, how can you build a conviction on the shifting sands of such ancient memories? The very records of the past became another enemy. The police reports of 1989, hammered out on typewriters or scrawled by hand, were like faded maps to a forgotten land. Details were lost to the ether, evidence vanished from the page, and the sacred chain of custody was sometimes broken. These crumbling paper trails left the cold case team trying to piece together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. And finally, time claimed the ultimate price, the witnesses themselves. The men and women who held pieces of the truth in 1989 were, by 2024, in their 70s, their 80s, or resting in the silent earth. Their secrets were buried with them. In the world of cold cases, every passing year is a funeral for another piece of the truth, another voice forever silenced. There was also the specter of shifting forensic sands, a ghost from the past haunting the present. What was deemed sound police work in 1989 would crumble under the scrutiny of today's standards. Yet, one cannot turn back the clock and unearth the scene anew. You are bound to the artifacts collected by bygone methods, forcing modern courts to question the very soul of that evidence. Defense attorneys for Victor and Megan Turner wielded these shadows of the past like weapons. They painted a masterpiece of doubt, arguing the case was a fossil, the evidence dust, the witnesses mere echoes. They spotlighted every fissure and flaw in the original investigation's foundation, insisting that without a concrete body of proof, the prosecution was building a castle of conjecture in the air, and their words held a chilling gravity. Circumstantial evidence, a constellation of facts, can blaze a trail to the truth, but it is just as easily rearranged to tell a different story. The defense could spin the very same threads into a cloak of innocence, or at the very least, weave the suffocating shroud of reasonable doubt. Consider this chilling tableau. The prosecution portrayed Victor's discovery of Justin's body as a sinister act. Why did the boy remain hidden through search after search? The defense countered with a narrative of human frailty, of searches plagued by chaos and stress, of a tragic oversight. 2 plausible tales, born from one dark fact, seeding a garden of doubt. The unnatural cold of Justin's small frame whispered of refrigeration, a detail prosecutors claimed was a testament to cold-blooded planning and access to the family's freezer. But the defense fought back, arguing that the science of death is an imprecise art, that the raw March weather could have been the culprit, that the entire theory was pure, chilling speculation. Once more, 2 reasonable arguments clashed, leaving the truth shrouded in mist. This is the very heart of the cold case labyrinth. You must unearth evidence so absolute, so overwhelming that it silences all other explanations, an almost impossible feat when battling decades of decay and the ghosts of a flawed investigation. Modern investigators perform miracles, but they are often fighting a war against time itself, their every move parried by defenders who know precisely where the armor is weakest. The Berkeley County cold case team waged a valiant war for Justin. They unleashed the most advanced forensic technology in their arsenal. They breathed life back into old witness accounts. They summoned experts from every field. They constructed what they felt was an undeniable monument to the truth. But compelling is a world away from beyond a reasonable doubt, and it was in that chasm that their case ultimately perished. It must be said that sometimes glimmers of light pierce the darkness of these cold cases. The silent witness of DNA has, on countless occasions, sung a song of truth decades after the crime. Confessions, like ghosts, sometimes rise from the guilty years later. A piece of evidence, once dismissed as trivial, can suddenly blaze with significance under a fresh pair of eyes. But these victories are the exceptions, the whispers of hope against a roar of unending silence. Most cold cases remain entombed in mystery. Most families are condemned to a lifetime without answers. Most killers who slip into the shadows in the moments after their crime are never dragged back into the light. It is a brutal, soul-crushing reality of our world. For every Justin Turner, where investigators forged a path and named the specters in the darkness, there are dozens of others where the trail is nothing but cold ash. No evidence, no whispers, no leads. Just a name etched on a stone, a life that became an eternal question mark. In that grim light, Justin's family was given a sliver of something, a theory, a face to the shadows, the knowledge that someone fought for their boy. But such comfort is a winter's sun, offering light but no warmth against the deep, unending chill of injustice. It is more than nothing, but it is a universe away from the justice that screams to be heard. Let your voices echo below if you've walked these haunted grounds before today, because we are about to distill the bitter lessons learned when justice itself fails to find its way. What can we unearth from the ashes of Justin Lee Turner's case? What haunting wisdom does his story impart that might shield future innocence or illuminate the path for those who seek justice in the dark? First, the sacred importance of a flawless beginning, of an investigation conducted as if the world is watching from day one. Every scene, a hallowed ground, every piece of evidence, a holy relic to be gathered, documented, and preserved. Every witness statement, a gospel to be recorded with perfect fidelity. You get one chance to build the foundation, for you can never go back and pour it again. The missteps in Justin's initial investigation were not born of malice or sloth. The investigators of 1989 fought with the tools and knowledge of their time, but the river of forensic science has carved a deeper, wider path since then, and what was once solid ground is now understood to be a floodplain. Police departments must forever evolve, constantly baptizing themselves in the waters of best practice. Second, the profound power of a relentless spirit. The fact that Justin's case was resurrected 35 years later is a miracle of tenacity. Most cold cases are left to slumber in dusty archives. Sheriff Lewis declared this ghost would walk again, breathing resources and belief into his team's quest. While convictions remained elusive, his persistence unearthed answers and a form of accountability, if only in the court of public opinion. The families of the lost can draw a powerful lesson from Justin's saga as well. Jennifer Pace's fight for her son was a mother's undying crusade, a flame that never flickered. After her passing, her family took up the torch. That unyielding fire kept the case from turning to ash, kept Justin's name a whispered prayer, and undoubtedly fueled the decision to face the darkness once more. Justice should not demand this of families, but the stark reality is that the loudest cries for the lost are the ones most often heard. Third, we must confront the tragic limitations of our own system of justice. This is a bitter pill, but a vital one. The system is forged as a shield to protect the innocent, a noble cause that sometimes allows the guilty to walk free. Legal standards and evidentiary rules can feel like cruel barricades on the road to justice, but they are the very bedrock of our liberty. The eternal challenge is to fortify the system, to make it a more perfect vessel for truth without cracking its sacred protections. We must also ask how we cradle the families of the slain, especially those left in the limbo of an unsolved case. These families inhabit a landscape of trauma most of us can never fathom. They need sanctuaries for their mental health, circles of shared grief, and fierce advocates. They deserve a justice system that honors their journey with transparency and dignity, and communities that refuse to let the memory of their loved ones fade. And with every fiber of our being, we must become better guardians against the horrors of child abuse and murder. The deepest tragedies are often foreshadowed. Most children are stolen by those who have already shown the darkness within them. Stronger shields for child protection, more lifelines for families drowning in stress, a heightened awareness of the warning signs, and the courage to intervene, these are the weapons that could save a life. Of course, no system is perfect, and we can never entirely banish the evil that lurks in the human heart. But we can, and we must do better. Every child lost like Justin is a catastrophic failure, a failure of family, of community, of the very systems designed to be their sanctuary. So how do we honor the fallen when the gavel falls silent? How do we ensure their light is not extinguished, that their lives resonate with a meaning far beyond the darkness of their end? For Justin's family, honoring him is a living act, keeping his story a burning torch, demanding answers, and offering their own scarred hands to other families navigating the same hell. Sarah Parsons has become a warrior, using her cousin's tragedy as a sword to demand reform. Michael Smith keeps a quiet vigil at the grave, a sacred connection, ensuring Justin's spirit remains a vibrant presence. These are the truest monuments of love. Communities, too, can weave a tapestry of remembrance by embracing these families, by forging lessons from tragedy, by consecrating sacred spaces in their name. Even if the playground envisioned for Justin never comes to be, the very conversation is a testament that a community's heart was broken and that it yearns to build something beautiful from the pain. Those of us who tell these stories bear a solemn responsibility. We must be artists of empathy, painting a portrait of the life that was lived, not just the lurid spectacle of its end. We must be agents of change, not just merchants of entertainment. We must always remember that for a family, this is not a story. It is the raw, unhealed wound of their life. And all of us, as voyagers in the world of true crime, can honor the victims by engaging with a conscious heart, by championing the causes that fight for victims' rights and breathe life into cold cases, by being vigilant sentinels in our own communities, watching over the vulnerable, by demanding a world that does more to prevent these stories from ever being written. Justin Lee Turner was 5 years old. He should have been a symphony of scraped knees and first crushes, of graduations and dreams and a family of his own. That entire universe of possibility was stolen from him on a cold March morning in 1989. We can never give him back that stolen future, but we can ensure he is remembered as more than a victim. His story is a profound tragedy, yes, but it is also a clarion call to our collective conscience, a searing reminder that children are fragile, that justice is precious, and that we all have a sacred duty to forge a safer world. It is a testament that even when systems falter, the human spirit can rise in persistence and advocacy. The final chapter is written in the legal case against Victor and Megan Turner. They cannot be tried again for this crime. In that sense, the story is over. But the epic tale of how we confront the murder of a child, of how we cradle the shattered families, of what justice truly means when it is denied by the court, that story is eternal. Every time Justin's story is shared, every time a lesson is learned from his loss, every time a heart is moved to better protect a child or support a victim that becomes his living legacy, it does not erase the horror, but it weaves a thread of meaning into the fabric of his memory, ensuring that his small, stolen life continues to cast a powerful light. As we draw the final curtain on this descent into the abyss of Justin Lee Turner's case, I must acknowledge the profound weight of this chronicle. If you journeyed through both chapters, I thank you for your courage to hear Justin's complete, heartbreaking saga. Thank you for enshrining his memory by seeking to understand the horror that befell him and why his stolen life echoes through eternity. If this story has left a scar upon your soul, know that this is the price of empathy. These tales are so profoundly disturbing because they are etched in the unforgiving stone of reality. Guard your own spirit. Step away from the shadows of true crime if you must. And remember, for every soul-shattering story like Justin's, there are millions of children bathed in the light of love, growing toward a future he was denied. The tragedies seize our attention not because they are the rule, but because they are the horrifying exception. For every parent, for all who work in the service of children, let Justin's ghost be a relentless sentinel, reinforcing the sacred duty of vigilance. Trust the currents of your intuition. See the warning signs for the fires they are. Never dismiss a child's fear for the sake of a convenient lie. Build sanctuaries where the smallest voices know they will be heard, and believe them when they tell you a monster is near. And for every one of us, let us contemplate how we might forge a world where the name Justin Turner is never again a synonym for tragedy. Perhaps it is in fortifying the legions of child protective services. Perhaps it is in demanding that the embers of cold cases are never allowed to die. Perhaps it is simply in becoming a vigilant neighbor, a guardian for the vulnerable. Or perhaps it is in how we carry these sacred stories with the reverence they command. Justin Lee Turner's life was a symphony, silenced before its crescendo. His death was a cataclysm that sent shockwaves through generations. His case exposes the deep fractures in our system of justice and the daunting mountains we must climb to solve the riddles of the past. But it also illuminates the unyielding power of persistence, the sacred act of remembering the lost, and the eternal war for truth, even when justice remains a phantom. Rest in the peace you were so cruelly denied, Justin. Your story has been unleashed upon the world. Your memory is a flame that cannot be extinguished, and the hearts that loved you never surrendered the fight, even when the system itself had fallen. And so concludes our haunting exploration of one of Berkeley County's most indelible scars. Be sure you are subscribed to this channel, a place for more unflinching investigations, deep dives into the frozen archives of cold cases, and the stories that scream to be told. Strike that notification bell so you never miss a single revelation. On the horizon, we unearth a case where the miracle of DNA finally unmasked a killer who hid behind a familiar face for 40 agonizing years, a grandmother's murder that shattered a small town's soul, a mystery that remained unsolved until a genetic key unlocked a stunning, unthinkable truth. You will not want to turn away. Cast your judgment in the comments below. Do you believe the web of evidence spun around Victor and Megan was strong enough to hold? Should they have faced a jury of their peers? What different path would you have walked as an investigator in this labyrinth of lies? I read every word, and I await your verdict. Thank you for lending your time to learn Justin's truth. Thank you for caring for a little boy whose life was stolen, and for a family that waged a war for his memory. And thank you for being part of a community that believes every victim's story is a sacred text, deserving of our utmost care and respect. Until our paths cross again in the shadows, remain vigilant, be a shield for one another, and never forget that every true crime story is a monument to real people, real families, and an ocean of real pain. Treat these chronicles with the gravity they have earned. This story was forged from real events that tore a community asunder. While some details have been dramatized and certain names veiled to protect the living, the core, unshakable facts of Justin Lee Turner's case are real. His family's agony is real. The failures of the justice system are real, and the profound importance of remembering him is the most real thing of all. Until the next story finds us, be well.